Technology and Government Affairs Committee will now come to order. We do have a quorum. Councilmember Zion is present, and myself, Councilmember Zion is present, and also myself, Chairman Cardenas, so that constitutes a quorum of a three-member committee.
Where's your other people?
I'd like to welcome Jan was confirmed to come. We'll announce her when she arrives. At this time, I'd like to hope everybody's New Year is going well. For CRA departments here, my condolences. Your New Year doesn't seem to be going very well based on this governor's major announcement, our new governor. But let's all try to make the best of it. CRA department, talking about eliminating it.
What's wrong with that?
It's a matter of opinion. I don't want to get rid of it. So we're going to debate it over and over and over again. Okay, with that, Councilmember Zion, unless you have any questions on item number 5, if we could go ahead and adopt the CLA report. Do you have any questions you'd like to bring?
That's fine.
Okay. So with that, item number 5, we'll go on consent. And we do not have any comment cards on item number 5, so therefore, that'll go on consent. Congratulations, those of you who are here for item number 5. You are now released to get back to your other duties. Thank you. We'll now go to item number 1.
For item 1, was before you as a motion, Cardenas, Gregorian, Reyes. This is relative to the feasibility of renegotiating existing cellular phone service contracts and establishing a procurement policy that achieves optimal savings on existing and future contracts.
Is there staff from GSD and ITA who can speak to this item? Thank you very much. Cell phones have been a big part of not only government, but business usage and efficiency, et cetera. Yet at the same time, when you're looking at any organization that has cell phones that number in the thousands, either the thousands per department or tens of thousands throughout the entire organization, such as the second largest city in the world, in the country, which is Los Angeles, it behooves us to constantly be reviewing and understanding what our old business model was and perhaps what a new business model is or should be. So can any of you shed some light on what our old business model has been, and then if we've had any paradigm shifts in a new business model?
I'll start. Deborah Ramos from GSD. In the past, the cell phone contracts have been treated as commodity contracts awarded through the purchasing agent, mainly because when we first started using cell phones, the larger dollar amounts were tied to the purchase of the cell phones, the equipment. Over time, as we have seen, the shift in costs really have moved from the equipment to the actual service. And so as they're being viewed as service contracts, the purchasing agent has been working with ITA to try to transition the contracts over to ITA. Currently, what we award are contracts based on WISCA rates or piggybacking off state contracts. And so in terms of pricing, I'm fairly confident that we're getting, based on the plans, very good pricing. We're leveraging our costs based on the usage of not only the City of Los Angeles, the State of California, but a number of other agencies. Where the real savings come into play is determining what usage plan fits a department best, and having a department monitor their billing, making sure that, in terms of if you're allocated 400 minutes and that's the plan that you decided to go with, if you're using 500 minutes, then you should be looking to see, is there another plan that fits the type of usage that the department is experiencing. So that's really where the large savings come into play, is trying to match your demand with the type of plan that you've enrolled in. Currently, departments have the option of going with Sprint, Nextel, AT&T, Verizon, or T-Mobile. So those are the 4 contracts that we have in place, and we leave it up to departments to determine based on coverage and plans that are available, which one fits their needs best.
Now, when it comes to being able to choose between 4 plans, let's just say collectively, for some reason, it just plays out that we are actually splitting our number of usage of cell phones by almost exactly 25% per plan or per company. Doesn't that dilute our ability to negotiate a better plan? It's one thing if you have 2,500 cell phones with a plan versus 10,000 cell phones with a
Right.
plan, with one plan. I would imagine that dilutes our ability to negotiate the best deal.
Well, it may, if we weren't pooling our resources or our usage with the usage of other agencies. I think when we were talking back there a little while ago, somebody made a comment that when you compare our usage to what the state's using or what the county's using or some other counties or other cities, we're just a little sliver. So we benefit from the usage of all these other agencies, and that's why when the state goes out, they kind of gather everybody's estimated or projected usage, and that's what they go out to bid for, and that's what the pricing is based on, not just what the city of LA uses, not just what the state uses, but what we collectively use.
And how do we stay abreast of what the latest and greatest plans are that we could take advantage of? Is there a clause in the contract between the city and these private cell phone companies that actually requires them to notify us if they've adjusted the plan in our favor?
Typically, yes. If they are making changes to the plans, they should let us know. We do conduct market research. We are in communication with the state because the state are the actual primary administrators of the plans. And so they're doing a lot of the oversight, and then we're coming up behind them, kind of trying to keep them in check and making sure that...
But with all due respect, our bills don't go through the state.
No, they
The
don't.
billing goes directly between us and that third party.
Correct, and that's where it becomes dependent on the department to make sure that they're looking at the contracts, looking at their usage and trying to measure it or match it up. I can use GSD as an example because we're one of the, many departments that are out there. And as a procedural decision, we've decided we're using one contractor, so all of the phones in GSD are through one contractor. We have somebody that monitors bills. We pull our users in order to make sure that we've got the best groupings. If we find somebody that spends a lot of time on the phone and we've got another person that we know they need a phone but they don't spend as much time, we partner them up so that we're never going over minutes or we're not paying for minutes that in essence
unused.
aren't being used. Right. And so as a department, this is a decision and some policies that we've put in place. But we leave that to all the departments to make and, to establish their own policies and to establish how they're going to monitor the contracts.
Well, one
Or
of the
the
things
usage, sorry.
that I'd like to be in part of the report back is, do we have the ability in these contracts to actually require that the third-party provider actually notify us when there's an adjustment? Obviously, they have to notify us if they're going to charge us more. I'm sure about that, because, then we get into big arguments. They say, whoa, what happened? I'm sure they tell us that, but when all of a sudden the state gets notified that there's a reduction in what they're charging in their plans, I'm pretty sure the carriers are leaving it up to us to tell them, hey, we heard that you guys improved the rate. Has that been adjusted? And then they're probably saying, oh, of course, we'll get to it right away. Not, don't worry about it. We took care of that on the 15th of last month when the state got their adjustment.
Right, and I think the adjustments aren't, for example, if they're changing the per minute rate, then we automatically get that. That isn't something that we wait for them to give us. What would change is the pools. For example, the offering might be 300 minutes, and this is the price at 300 minutes. And then when they, for whatever reason, they reevaluate their plans and they decide, okay, we're not going to do a 300-minute plan, we're going to do a 400-minute plan, or we're going to do a 250-minute plan. Those are the things that it's up to us to monitor. And there are a lot of tools that they provide us. Again, as a department or as a user, it's kind of up to us to determine if we're going to use those tools or not. In GSD, we make use of all the tools that they offer us, and we've been able to really keep our cell phone costs down significantly. And we're constantly making adjustments to groupings and pools and all of that. So, but I can definitely go back and find out if there is a specific clause or if there's a specific requirement, and any negotiations or changes that we make in this transition, I'm sure ITA is agreeable to the same.
For example, a contract might say, there's a big difference between the contract says shall and may.
Correct.
Right? They may means it's subjective.
Right,
Shall
they
means
may
that-
put it out there and leave it up to us to go find it.
Exactly.
Versus saying, here it is.
Yeah, if it says they shall, then that means that if they're delinquent, then we're going to get a retroactive, right?
Right.
You were going to say?
In Kevin Crawford, ITA, in the negotiations that we have been underway to replace the contracts for GSD as ITA takes them over, what we have been telling the companies is that we don't expect them just to come and tell us that there's a new rate or a new plan. We expect them to come and help us with the usage that are on these phones so that they can also make recommendations. Because if we have people out there that are on plans that are way too expensive and they're just not using the usage that they're procuring, that we want to be told that that's not happening. So it's not just on the department to sit there and go through every single phone bill, which we just don't have the staff or time for.
Correct. So each department and each user has a responsibility to report back up the chain.
Correct.
Mr. Stein?
Well, thank you. How many cell phones do we have throughout the city of Los Angeles and its city employees? All departments, fire, police, building safety.
I'm not sure. Kevin, have you surveyed?
The survey that we've got is somewhere between 6,000 and 7,000, but the last full audit that was done was a few years ago, and it said that we have over 11,000. So my guesstimation, and I apologize, I don't have anything more specific, but my guesstimation is we're north of 7,000.
When's the last time there was an audit on the number of phones? Just straight number of phones?
3 years ago,
3 years ago?
Actually, the controller's office is in the process of conducting an audit
as we speak.
as we
Is
speak.
part of that audit going to determine the number of cell phones that the city's paying for?
I believe so.
It should be if it's not. Because if we don't know how many we have, we won't have any gauge to go by. The vendors, the chair mentioned where we have these different vendors, different services, and I know that some are probably better rated higher than others. Consumer Reports said AT&T was miserable as far as the service, and I've used it in the past. It's a terrible service. You mentioned the state. The state doesn't have any oversight of what we do with our cell phones. We could actually scrap cell phones for the city of Los Angeles. The state has no say over it. So I think what you're saying is they maybe have us as part of the bulk purchase and maybe some contract, but we have to do that individually, every municipality.
Correct.
So if the state, say, goes with Verizon and we go with T-Mobile, I mean, that's the way we go. We may look at what's the best service at the most reasonable price and give that vendor that particular contract. And I think it sends, it helps these different companies. They're all billion-dollar companies, but what is it doing for our annual bills? And what would be the annual bill? The last time there was an audit, did they add up how much we spent annually on cell phones?
I don't believe so.
See, these are basic,
Right.
elementary questions that we need to know. I mean, we're struggling in our budget. It's no secret. Do you have that answer?
We're going to have them come back in 15 days with all the answers.
I understand that, but since it's on the agenda now,
Sure.
and you came forward, do you have that information?
I'm Cynthia Varela with the Controller's Office, and sorry for the interruption, but, there was a comment made that the Controller is in the midst of an audit on cell phones, and I just wanted to clarify what we're looking at. But as far as the immediate question that you had about expenditures, based on our background information for fiscal year 2009, 2010, our expenditures are less than $5 million.
Okay.
It's about
Somewhere in the 5
about
million.
4.5, yeah, 4.5 million.
Okay. That's for all the cell phones for all departments.
Yes.
Now, I know the police department uses asset forfeiture funds to pay their bill. Do any other departments use other funds to pay for or would that be included in this total?
This was,
If it's a special funded project and they're using special funds to pay versus general fund money?
that I can't answer. What we looked at was based on the contracts, and then we checked our SMS and FMIS system, and then looked to see what charges had been applied to those contracts.
Okay.
And I'm not sure.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Through the SMS system, it could be any fund. So it could be, say, a sanitation fund, it could be a forfeiture fund, it could be general fund, it could be any one of the funds that are available to the various departments.
Yeah, we need to identify which come out of general fund and then which come out of other funds. Because if the police department's using asset forfeiture funds, it doesn't hit the general fund, and they use their phones, obviously, for their purposes, along with every other department.
We should be able to get that breakdown for you.
Well, absolutely, there's no question they should be efficient. They should save money. I know the governor's clamped down on cell phones. I think they're bringing back a number of cell phones that are not going to be at the state expense anymore. And I'm sure theirs is multiple millions of dollars. So we got the annual cost. I understand from our city attorney that part of the contract is when the rates change, we're supposed to have our bills reflect those rate changes. Have we ever audited to see if that's being done? For example, the rate, I mean, you keep on seeing text and this and that and the other. It used to be a cell phone. Then we got into cell phone and texting. Now we're in all these other components. Do we stay up to date on the transformation and the cost and how it's supposed to be adjusted? Does anyone actually monitor that?
Again, that's left up to the departments to look at. So I know that we, in GSD, we are looking at the bills versus the contract, I believe. But I can't say what other departments
So
are using.
each department, building and safety, has phones. They may have an Nextel system where they can beat back and forth. City attorney, I don't know what he has, or the controller, or these other departments. But there's no real unified fashion. Every department does what they wish to do.
Right.
Now, some have text. I don't know if they need texting. Maybe they just need a cell phone
Right.
versus the capability to do texting, which obviously is more expensive than just a cell phone.
I think if I can clarify what the controller's audit is actually going to do, that's in process. I can't discuss any of the issues at this point in time since we've just started, but our objectives are really to look at some of those things. It's not necessarily on a citywide basis. We're really looking at it on select departments, but we're looking at the oversight and management of cell phone usage. So part of the audit objectives is looking at how departments are monitoring the cell phone usage for appropriate business use, what criteria they're using for assigning cell phones, and looking at how the departments are determining which of the cell phone contracts and phone plans provide the maximum value. So we're looking at a select number of departments to see what their processes are, and then what makes sense at that point in time.
So what do we do with those other departments that aren't being looked into? Obviously, there's a whole bunch of departments. I know they can't do everything.
Right, and the selection of departments that we're looking at are some of our bigger users, but we also have a few of the smaller departments. Sometimes when it's a smaller department, you've got an easier process to manage that, and there may be some good practices that can be utilized by the larger departments. I think the findings from this audit could probably be applied citywide because we've got this across the board kind of review of departments' usage.
And when do they plan to have that audit complete?
At this point in time, I can't give you a definite. We're right at the point where we've done some preliminary work and we're deciding what detailed work needs to be done. So that's something that still needs to be discussed.
6
with
months, a
management.
year, 2 months?
No, much sooner than that.
Sooner than
Within a couple months,
Okay.
probably, a month or two.
We're also, GSD has been in discussion with the city attorney's office and with the controller's office, looking at potentially bringing somebody on board to specifically look at the rates and tariffs to ensure that the city has been being charged properly, but that's still in the early discussion stages.
And do we pay tax on the phone bills?
Yes,
So we're paying ourselves for ourselves?
similar to sales tax, yes.
Because sometimes we don't pay, like on car registration, we're not taxed. Have we ever looked at, and we take it out of one pocket, put it in the other pocket, have we ever looked at that? Now, why we would not tax ourselves? for something we're using for the public purpose?
We have not looked at it specifically related to telephone, but we have looked at it in terms of commodities, and the state has not relented. We are required to pay sales tax and
But
or
we pay our,
use tax.
but we get the tax, though. There's a
sorry?
tax on the cell phone for the city. So line, we're taking out of one pocket, put in the other pocket.
Right.
And
And
we
if we,
could keep that money and maybe keep people on the payroll.
right, and if we don't pay it, then we end up paying fines for not paying it up front.
Takes
So-
legislation to change that.
Well,
Right.
fix it.
It's a lot more complicated. The way you put it, it's real simple. But
I think simple
when you
makes
start
it
to get
fair.
into telecom issues and legislation, it's not easy.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zion. Seeing no more questions from the committee, we'll go to public comment. I do not have any public comment cards on item number 1. Anybody here for public comment on item number 1? Seeing and hearing no one come forward, public comment on item number 1 is now closed. So with that, what this committee will do, we will instruct the members of the IT Oversight Committee to report on opportunities to achieve cost savings through negotiating existing cellular phone service contracts and recommend a procurement policy for cellular phone service agreements within the next 15 days, including, for example, getting a report back as best possible of the number of cell phones that are within the city's contracts currently. Any specific things you
Well,
wanted to add to that report back?
They list a number of departments from aging down to the zoo. And I'm looking at some of these departments, and I really question why some of these departments need cell phones. What we need to also look at is how many cell phones each department has. Because there's some departments here, if you look at the department, you'd wonder, what do they actually need a cell phone for? And if they have hundreds of cell phones, what are they doing with 100 cell phones when you question why they need them in the first place? So every department that we have, and just the blank number, this department has this department has that,
Broken
and-
down by department.
by department. So each department, the number of cell, not the bills or anything, just the number of cell phones they have. And I know that also with the police department, with the senior leads, there were cell phones provided them by some donation. So we also need to look at how many of those cell phones within the city were provided by donation. Those donations have now expired, and we're picking up the tab
Yep.
on the general
Bad.
fund, because I'm sure a lot of departments received them under grants, and as they expire, we keep that equipment. So basically, the whole comprehensive report on volume of cell phones.
Okay.
And if we find out that we're providing Billy the elephant with a cell phone, somebody better answer as to why Billy has a cell phone,
Okay.
okay? Like prisoners in,
And they do.
state prison.
They
like-
do. They
Was
do.
it Charles Manson, apparently?
Well, there were
They
some
caught
people.
him with a cell phone?
They got Facebook.
Who's paying for it? That's the question.
Yeah. Well, that's what they do, is they then commit credit card fraud to pay for it while they're in prison. That's already been documented. So, and they're already locked up, so we need to take care of the people who are not locked up.
Okay. Thank you. Little
That
side
being the
note there.
taxpayers of the city of Los Angeles.
We better hope we don't have anything crazy like that going on. Anyway,
No.
I don't suspect that we do. All right. If we do, then Wendy's going to have a lot more fun than she thought. Okay. That being the case, that's the instruction on this item. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And item number 2, we're going to put item number 2 over to the next committee hearing.
Fantastic.
Okay. So those of you here for item number 2, I apologize. We're putting that over to the next committee hearing. We're now on item number 3.
Move right along.
On item 3, the Chief Legislative Analyst is here to provide a verbal update on the Governor's State Budget Proposal.
Good afternoon, John Wickham with the Office of the Chief Legislative Analyst, and
Hold on a second. We're here to talk about the Governor's State Budget Proposal, but why do we have the CRA here? We never have the CRA sitting at the desk when it comes to going over
I think
the
they're
state
defending
budget proposal. What's so special this year?
there's a special proposal this year regarding redevelopment that has come forward. So the governor released his budget last week, and in that he identified over an 18-month period a hole of about $25 to $28 billion in the state budget, depending on who's doing the math. And that's $8.2 billion this year and $17.2 billion next year. A number of the one-time solutions and fixes that they had in past budgets are not really available to them anymore. They can't borrow from the market, they can't borrow from local governments. The tax increases that were put in place 3 years ago are set to expire on June 30th of this year, and there are questions about whether votes are in place to extend those one way or another. And then in this budget year, they were trying to sell some of the state properties, and they've had difficulty with that. So all of these kinds of one-time things they were using to extend are no longer out there.
Are they trying to sell any parking lots or just buildings?
Just buildings at this point. Because of the recent election in November, it does only require a majority to pass a budget now, but they still have a 2/3 requirement to pass new taxes or fees. There are some questions about what it takes to extend existing taxes or fees, and so the lawyers are busy up in Sacramento looking at those kinds of questions. The governor has proposed a special election in June to consider extension of the taxes that are currently on the books, and those taxes would be extended to pay for 12 through K education at current levels and to deal with some of the realignment proposals that the government has brought forward. So in terms of immediate impacts on the city, there are a few that we've identified. The first and major one is the dissolution of redevelopment areas entirely. That would disestablish existing agencies effective July 1st and transfer debt obligation, contractual obligations over to a successor agency that would only deal with those debt issues. It would transfer any of the affordable housing funds that agencies currently control over to, in the budget it says the Housing Authority, and in the city of Los Angeles we have a housing department, which would probably be a more appropriate place for that if we get to that. They have a proposal to create a new funding mechanism for economic development at the local level, and that would be a 55% vote approval for limited tax increases and bonding against local revenues for development projects. That would have to go to the ballot for...
They anticipate that would be on the June ballot, correct?
Yes.
The legislature would put that on the ballot if
Yeah.
they choose to.
That would be a constitutional amendment to allow local jurisdictions to do this.
And the last time they did that for schools, right? Local school.
Yeah.
funding. I think it was Johnny Burton's bill, and right around 2000, I think it was on a 2002 ballot, and they reduced it from 2/3 local bonds for schools specifically.
Yes.
To 55%. So there's precedent that the voters have agreed to reduce the 2/3 threshold on a specific kind of increase.
Exactly. Another impact would be the elimination of tax increments, tax credits for enterprise zones. We have a number of those in the city. There is a proposal to eliminate funding for local libraries. There are a number of different grants that we receive from the state. It would be more than $1.3 million impact on our library departments.
Now, those are not, those are grants that they seem to have been forwarding to local government for libraries on a budgetary basis, right?
Yes.
It's not some kind of statute that's running that they would have to reverse. It's basically something they would do in the budget process.
Yes.
So they've already signaled downline warning local jurisdictions that fund libraries such as counties and cities. Basically, they warned them that, look, that's a line item target that we're going to eliminate in this year's budget.
Exactly. And that currently, library department uses that for staffing, for purchasing books, and for literacy programs. So we should anticipate that those are gone.
Anybody remember what the round figure of all told what our library department budget is, roughly?
I don't have that number.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I was just trying to get a perspective what 1.3 million.
As a percentage,
Yeah.
how severe is that?
Regardless, it's money we don't have to plug in, I'm
Yeah.
sure, but I just wondering if we could get a perspective. Go ahead.
Exactly. They have proposed to review all state mandates and eliminate where appropriate. There's also a proposal to withhold sale of $90 million in housing bonds. Apparently, across the board, they'll be withholding the sale of bonds on transportation and a whole other range of purposes. So that will have an impact on the housing department in future notices of funding availability.
Now, that's 90 million statewide or 90 million that impacts the city of LA?
Statewide. So a smaller proportion would impact
So we might
us.
be affected by about 9 million-ish or
Yeah.
something. So,
Yeah.
okay. Some
Exactly.
portion of that 90 million would directly affect the city of LA.
Exactly. So clearly, the redevelopment question is the largest impact on the city out of all of those. Otherwise, it's pretty minimal. Then there are a whole range of proposals in other areas that have indirect impacts on the city. For example, the California Science Center and Exposition Park, they're going to cut $3.7 billion out of their budget, but allow that museum to backfill by charging an entrance fee. They currently do not charge an entrance fee. They would be allowed to charge a fee. There's a decrease in small business loan programs. There's proposal to partially or fully close some state parks. There are 3 or 4 state parks in the city of Los Angeles. Will Rogers over in the 11th district, Los Encinos State Park, which I believe is either in the 3rd or the 5th district on Ventura Boulevard. It's in the 5th, and then the new state park in downtown Los Angeles. We don't have a list yet. We don't know what parks are targeted, but there are several parks in the city that could be affected by that.
Now, you say close the park. It's hard to close, like the cornfields. You
Yeah.
can park and walk in. So what are they talking about closing? They going to fence them up, or are they just not going to maintain them?
No idea what that means.
Okay.
Yeah. And in a park like that, that's virtually impossible. You're going to put a 10-foot with, concertina wire around it, and who's going to pay for that? Exactly.
I think it's logical to close a public park. If they're not going to maintain it, then it becomes a
Exactly.
homeless encampment.
Exactly. They're raising copays or increasing copays on several health programs. There's a proposal to eliminate adult day health care, multi-purpose senior service program, reduce CalWORKS grants, reduce SSI, SSP payments, eliminate the State Division of Juvenile Justice and transfer that down to local governments. And then
What's that do? State Division of Juvenile Justice. What exactly is the State Division of Juvenile Justice?
I don't know. I will look into that.
Basically, it was formed and solidified in the year 2000 when I passed the juvenile justice legislation, the Shift Cardenas Act. But basically what happens is they've been funding locally around about $100 million a year for intervention, prevention, and some reentry programs. So that State Department used to monitor those grants, per capita grants, and then they used to actually do work, which is to get reports back, what did they do with the money, et cetera, and they couldn't give that money back out, such as to the city of to the county of Los Angeles jurisdiction, until they actually got those reports to make sure that people aren't just doing willy-nilly with the money, that they're actually doing something. So bottom line is that's an interesting shift that they're recommending. But
Well, they'll still have the money, but they can just abandon the Division of Juvenile Justice.
yeah, but then again, the awkward part about it is that so local jurisdictions are going to be left to monitor themselves, which is one of the biggest problems we had with juvenile justice funding. Is in the old days, if you had a good organization in a community, nice people, they would give them the money and they'd see a bunch of kids running around, but every day, but they never got any reports as to what are you doing with these kids? Are you teaching them how to use computers? Are you helping them with their homework? Or, what exactly are you doing? So the state was actually requiring reports on all that. But if we're going to monitor ourselves, it makes it a very interesting endeavor, because then we're going to go back to the old days, where they give money and they just cross their fingers and hope they use it well.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And then higher education is seeing substantial cuts, $500 million cut from both UC and CSU systems, and $400 million from the community college system. So those are areas where there will be indirect impacts on the city of Los Angeles. Another major area in the budget is the realignment of services, transferring services from the state down to local government. It's seen as a multi-phased project over several years. The first phase is all that they've described, and it relates to transferring services to counties specifically. So there's changes in the CAL FIRE state responsibility areas. It doesn't impact the city of LA on that program specifically that I can see. But transferring court security down to counties, transfer jurisdiction for lower level offenders and parole violators to counties, shift adult parole responsibility.
I got a
Yes.
question on court security. Court security.
Yes.
Courts were county and now they're state.
Yes.
So they used to have a county judicial procedures commission which was abandoned. And I was on that commission because the county said the state has jurisdiction of the courts. So how do we then transfer the court security to the counties when the county's already maintaining control with the deputy sheriffs?
Yeah.
So how does that work out? They're already there.
Yeah. A lot of these proposals, there are no details. And it's been 9 days since the proposal came forward. We're looking to see legislation, we're looking to see detailed language, what this means, and we're looking to see...
This kind of like a wish list then.
Yeah, these are all kind of wish list items.
All of this requires passage of the budget by the legislature, and then after that, the governor gets to see what part of this actually made it through the process.
Yeah.
Okay.
One piece of analysis I've seen so far is that they're transferring the services, but they're not transferring all the money. The transfer of money comes down to about 40 cents on the dollar for what these programs currently cost.
So where the state handled those services, they afforded themselves $1 for $1's worth of work.
Yeah.
Now, when they're transferring it down to local governments, they're only transferring down about 40% of the money to do $1's worth of work.
Yes.
And does this mean that those employees would transfer to the counties, or would those employees lose their jobs?
In a number of these, that's a good question. We'd have to take a look and see if these are state employees who are losing their jobs and it's becoming a local, or if it's state funding for programs that are, it's got to be a state service, because that's why they're transferring it to locals.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah.
So the state employees that,
Yep.
are they going to say, you got to go, the county's going to pay for you, or they're
Yeah.
going to lose their job?
They'll
Yeah.
probably get first right of refusal as an employee of the state to apply for that job, and we would probably absorb them, at least for the first 90 days, et cetera, that kind of thing. So it obviously is a lot more complicated than it appears to be on the surface.
Yeah. And I think it's important for us to watch this closely, not just because of the impact on county services and what happens there, but there may be other services that the state later decides that need to go to cities. And if the process is set up that they're only giving 40 cents on the dollar for services, and we have the potential in the future to get stuck with things without the funding. So I think this is a very critical area to watch, monitor, and see. On the plus side, maybe there's stuff that the state's doing that we want to take control of, and we can make some proposals forward, but that's down the line. And then in detail on the redevelopment agency, Jim D'Antona with the agency is here. The quick that I have on that is their proposals to eliminate redevelopment agencies, to create a successor agency to administer the debt. They expect that the effect is to relieve the state of $1.7 billion in costs that they backfill to schools and counties and special districts. And so that'll relieve their budget deficit. But some of the analysis that I've seen so far is that they've grossly underestimated the amount of debt in redevelopment agencies. That it turns out redevelopment agencies across the state currently have about $80 billion worth of debt, $30 billion in debt service, and another $50 billion in contractual debt. And that means that they're not going to see a dime for years by doing this. It's not going to make any difference. The last bit of note, the state legislative analyst has recommended to the legislature that they immediately pass emergency legislation to put to stop redevelopment agencies from passing any actions that obligate the agency immediately until this proposal is completely considered, because they're afraid that agencies are going to jump in and do things.
They're already doing that.
At least over the weekend, I wasn't able to identify that there's even a spot bill that they've been got and amended. Any news on that?
Not yet. So I'll turn it over to Jim. He'll have more details on such things.
Good afternoon, council members. Jim D'Antona for the Community Redevelopment Agency. That was a pretty good, quick summary. I mean, it's pretty easy. There's July 1, Governor would like to see us go away.
We like you, Jim.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. The biggest issue is that $1.7 billion. The Legislative Analyst's Office, when I was watching the State Senate budget review, said that to the senators, normally, even if you wanted to do this, you would need a 4 to 5 year transitional period to try and make all the things that you need to happen. But you have a $1.7 billion gap that the governor has proposed by taking money from the redevelopment agencies. As Mr. Wickham said, they've probably grossly underestimated how much money they'd be able to sweep out of our unencumbered monies to fill that $1.7 billion. Whether that's even legally possible, because once it's non-tax increment, it's our opinion it belongs back to the counties and the cities and the school districts, not to the governor to redirect under Prop 22. But the idea is, the bigger picture for Los Angeles is that it's obviously bigger than just losing the redevelopment agency. Right now, 100% of that tax increment money from Los Angeles comes to Los Angeles and is used in Los Angeles. If we were eliminated, only 30% of that would come back to the city as part of the property tax dollars. I think 40 goes to the schools and 25% goes to the county. So over the next 5 years, we've already kind of looked out and projected that there's about $600 million due the city of Los Angeles if the redevelopment agency is here in tax increment. Because obviously 70% of that goes away if we're eliminated. The bigger issue is that last year, the redevelopment agency did $18 million of public improvement projects as we were ramping up to do more public improvement projects in the city of Los Angeles. We spent $5 million hiring the city of Los Angeles to help do some of that work. So there's the money that the city would be getting back would almost be a wash at best, just based on what CRA does with the city of Los Angeles. Don't even go into the next step, which is creating jobs, housing, and the issues that the economic development that we bring to the city, creating sales tax, creating all the other revenues that benefit the city. When you look at, for instance, even the Pacoima Panorama City over that 5 year period has the second most amount of money, that we would lose probably about $57 million over the next 5 years in investment into that community. Second only to Hollywood, which would lose about $100 million. The bigger picture is also, once that money is taken away and given back to the city, that goes to the general fund, to which it would certainly fund other projects, but would it go directly to benefit our most disadvantaged communities that we represent? So the budget elimination of the Community Redevelopment Agency has so many negatives for the city, it's hard to enumerate them all. I mean, we just recently got approved for $29 million in grants from the state for 7 parks to develop in Los Angeles. We're eliminated. Again, I know the city, I'm sure, would be applying for some of those, but would they get them? We've been very successful with Prop 1C, Prop 84, in getting bringing dollars back to the city to try and help our most disadvantaged communities. So obviously it's a big press for us we've been spending a lot of time and resources on developing a lot of these projects, and for the state to say, the time you're working that you've already been approved, fiscal year 2011, you may have to completely stop encumbering dollars, is extremely worrisome to us, because we have things that we need to finish, especially if they plan on eliminating this July 1. But for the longer picture, clearly there's a lot of money that would be taken out of the city of Los Angeles and moved to a lot of different places.
Any questions? I know we're in shock, but
No, it's just like, you wait and see.
that's
Change every day.
Yeah.
that's why there's an
Jim, you've been around different offices, there's always a spot for you someplace.
Keep getting traded. Player to be named later.
So
Hagen personal.
your CLA is monitoring Sacramento on a daily basis. The mayor's office has staff up there, and they are monitoring the issues. We have connections with the League of California Cities and with the California Redevelopment Association, who are all monitoring and talking. So we have access to information, and we'll bring forward issues as they arise.
Well, we monitor the governor has to come up with a balanced budget,
Yep.
Yes.
and there are no avenues other than drastic adjustments to have a balanced budget. So
Yeah.
somehow the pain's going to affect everyone.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely.
One way or another. And this way is turning our economic development locally upside down.
Yep.
That's why the old saying goes, hold on to your women and your horses, the legislature's in session. In the old days before cars.
You know what else it says? This is why I get so, take this back, friends. This is why I got so irritated with the agency over the past few years. Because when we were in a boom, and the window was open, we could get a lockdown. Get it, the market was on the upswing, not on the downswing. We should push more projects to move faster. Instead, please take steps, not directed at Chris.
Of course. She just got here.
Previous administration, we got tortured. It was pure living hell to try to get any project for the agency. And we just wasted precious time. Because now look where we are, That's too bad.
Agreed. And, we've been focusing on housing during that boom because it was expensive, but we also need to make sure that our focus is on jobs.
Yeah,
Yeah,
especially
we'd love
during
to
this
focus
time.
on jobs. That'd be really nice. I thought with Chris and you there, Jim, we were going to start doing that, but
We're certainly trying. Hopefully we can get out of the guillotine here
yeah.
and really start delivering for the city on that.
Based on what Ms. Perry said, there's a more rated G version of an old saying is, don't put off for tomorrow what you can get done today, CRA.
That will be our priority.
Added one is CRA, but that goes for everybody. It's a good thing to live by. We're learning that big time. So we are on item number 3, and with that, there's no action to be taken. It's a report, and is there anybody here to make comment on item number 3? Seeing and hearing none, item number 3, no action taken. Thank you very much. Thank you. Note and file that report. And with that, Ms. Perry, we did take item number 5, the CLA report as amended, as was adopted. You concur with that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we'll open the roll on that, and so Ms. Perry concurs, so that's a 3-0 vote. So we are on our last item on the agenda, which is item number 4. Please read.
The Chief Legislative Analyst has submitted a report in response to a resolution raised Krikorian relative to the city's position to sponsor and/or support legislation to allow local jurisdictions to use discretional approval of applications for the installation of solar arrays exceeding 5 megawatts to achieve land use neighborhood compatibility.
John Wickham with CLA. The state law currently provides that cities and counties must administratively approve applications for the installation of solar panels unless they have an adverse impact on public health and safety. There have been recently 2 permits pulled for the installation of solar panels in the city, and there is absolutely no community input whatsoever. One of these in particular has been identified to be located in a high fire zone, and there are a lot of concerns about safety issues for that project. This resolution proposes a change to state law to allow local jurisdiction to have discretion for solar systems that are greater than 5 megawatts. And this, for these 2 permits, for example, this will give the community an opportunity to weigh in on any potential impacts. We've heard that there are other cities across the state that have this problem and are very concerned about this. They're monitoring this issue and looking for legislation similar to what the city is proposing here. So the CLA recommends adoption of the resolution for inclusion in our next program.
Any questions? I just want to comment on the record that the greater than 5 megawatts means that we have no interest in interfering with or interjecting a process if somebody wants to put some solar panels on their roof or something like that. A 5 megawatt project means that bigger projects that perhaps are acres in size, and for the local jurisdiction not to have any process legally available to us to have any discretion obviously is something that needs to be changed. So with that, we have one public comment card, members. It is from Jill Surreal. Hi, Joe.
Hi, good afternoon. Jill Soriel from Councilmember Reyes' office. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of the resolution. As CLA indicated, we are basically looking to add some local discretion to large solar projects so that they're not just over-the-counter review. Our community really, this hillside project that went in, they were divided between wanting to support solar, but also feeling that there was a hillside protection ordinance in place that needed to be respected. So we tried with the resolution to define what a large solar project would be, and we have a working group currently made up of Planning Department, Building and Safety, DWP, Fire, and City Attorney. They had advised us that 5 megawatts might be too large to capture the in-basin projects, and we're recommending lowering that threshold to around 1 megawatt, if your committee is agreeable with that. And we're continuing the working group to try and create a local solar zoning ordinance that would make it easier in areas where it's appropriate. For example, we could ease some of the height restrictions in an industrial zone, but still be able to look at sensitive areas like hillsides or open space or the high fire hazard zones. So we look forward to continuing to work locally and at the state, and that's basically it in a nutshell. Thank you.
Okay. Be a nice battle between the environmentalists and the Sierra Club.
The environmentalists and the environmentalists.
Dealing with open space.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So with that, that closes public comment on item number 4. Did you want to make any comment?
Marcus Storms, acting fire marshal. Chief Bill's out of town. The fire department is here in support of the whole concept of working with the industry and getting these issues through the process for review. Our staff is also concerned about the 5 megawatt. The 5 megawatt would be a very large industrial type of setup, and we would also encourage making the threshold a little bit lower. We have a number of safety concerns relative to both firefighter safety and public safety, and we just very much want to be a part of the review process to help these move forward in a safe manner.
Okay. Thank you very much. Anybody else for public comment on item number 4? Seeing and hearing none, public comment on item number 4 is now closed. So what we have before us is a motion to adopt the CLA recommendations to adopt the resolution and sponsor legislation. With that, okay, that item is approved on a 3-0 vote. That concludes all the items on the agenda, or I'm sorry, item number 6. No, that's it. Just items 1 through 5, right? Okay. All right. Okay. So